Hello and welcome back to the Adventures of Lola Badiola. In the last episode, a meeting was arranged between Park Jae-bong and the beautiful, mysterious girl with the almond eyes. In this episode, we're going to find out what happened next.
The Adventures of Lola Badiola. Chapter 18. The Apartment. Park arrived back at his apartment at 7:30. He took off his shoes and went to the toilet. He lived in a modern apartment on the 22nd floor of a tower block in Zone 7 of the Chunghwa district. As a D-grade government employee, he had certain privileges over the general public. He had a separate kitchen with a small fridge freezer and an oven with 2 electric hobs. He didn't own any luxuries like a microwave, a dishwasher, or a washing machine, but he did have a television, which was the envy of all of his neighbors. Unlike most North Korean people, Park knew that he was poor. He knew that the standard of living in the North was significantly lower than in the South. He knew that the infrastructure of his country remained backward, and most of his countrymen still worked in hard, time-consuming jobs in the agricultural sector. Park also knew that the economies of many other East Asian nations had progressed dramatically over the last 30 years as a result of globalization. They had successfully worked together through institutions such as the United Nations and the World Trade Organization to promote international cooperation. The Supreme Leader was convinced that these institutions would eventually collapse in the aftermath of a Marxist revolution. Park wasn't so sure. South Korea was now much richer than North Korea. It had higher levels of technology and productivity. The people seemed happier. They seemed to have more fun. Park wondered what his life would be like if he had been born 150 kilometers south, the distance between the communist haven of Pyongyang and the capitalist center of Seoul. Park looked at the analog clock on his wall. It was 7:45 p.m. Chunghwa Park was a 15-minute walk from his apartment. Who was the girl with the almond eyes? Why had she invited him to meet her? Was she a member of the secret police? It was quite normal for the government to spy on its own employees. There was even a department that spied on the spies of the employees. Or was it possible that this invitation was genuine, that this mesmerizing woman actually wanted to go on a date with him? Of the two possibilities, Park was more worried about the latter. He was almost 30 years old and still a virgin. He walked into the bathroom, combed his hair, and then opened the bottle of Dragon aftershave, his prized possession, a gift from Kim after one of his business trips to China. He carefully placed a drop of the liquid on his index finger, then spread it across the left side of his neck. He repeated the action for the right side of his neck. He didn't want to waste a drop. The liquid was more valuable to him than plutonium was to the Supreme Leader. He stepped back from the mirror and imagined himself with his arm around the girl with the almond eyes. Whether she was a spy, or a potential girlfriend, or both, he was determined to find out. He left his apartment and headed onto the street. It was a dark winter's night, but fortunately the streetlights were working that evening. He walked along the clean and orderly streets of the Chunghwa district until he reached the main road. Then he hailed a bicycle cab and jumped into the back of the carriage. Pyongyang was a city for the elite. It was considered a paradise by the peasants who scraped a living from the unproductive lands in the countryside. Park felt thankful to the Supreme Leader that he had been invited to live there. The road to Chunghwa Park was full of traffic. There was a mix of diesel buses, horse-drawn carts, and Chinese motor cars. The government vehicles had black number plates, the foreign residents had red number plates, and the very rare privately owned cars, perhaps gifts to sportsmen or actors, had yellow number plates. However, most of the citizens of Pyongyang walked or caught the bus. It was one of the privileges of being a D-grade government employee that Park could flash his identification and hail a bicycle cab. As he sat in the back of the carriage, he wondered who the mysterious girl was, what her father did, and why her family lived in Pyongyang. At exactly 7:59 p.m., Park arrived at his destination. He got out of the cab and stood beneath a huge poster of the Supreme Leader. He looked around the surrounding area for his date, trying to appear relaxed but feeling deeply insecure. Walking towards him were two people, a middle-aged lady in her mid-50s, short and slightly bent, with grey hair and pale skin. Next to her was a tall and slim young woman with a beautiful round face and almond-shaped eyes. His date and her chaperone had arrived.